Thank you for all coming out tonight. And I think we're in for a really interesting, thoughtful evening. And I'm glad you're here. When I first learned about Tim Shriver's Dignity Index, I knew that was something that I had to share with the Planet Word audience. Because I'd always hoped that Planet Word would be a place where people learned to think carefully about the words they used and would learn why they shouldn't use their human superpower, their words, to ridicule or demean, or to use the term of the week, to disparage others. But it's one thing to have those really lofty expectations, but how would Planet Word, a museum, really be able to transmit those values and have an impact? The answer? We needed to focus a spotlight on people who have solutions, who can guide us. So in May, we heard from Michelle Norris about her 14-year race card project, which makes people stop and think about what race means in their lives and express those thoughts in just 6 words. So tonight, we're fortunate to hear from Tim Shriver about his Dignity Index, a practical tool to help people monitor their words before they regret them. This struck home for me because a few years ago, my husband Tom changed his business cards from Thomas L. Friedman, New York Times Foreign Affairs columnist, to Thomas L. Friedman, humiliation and dignity columnist, because he realized that all the big issues that he was writing about involved people who were searching for dignity and fighting against humiliation. The Chinese had been seeking respect all the way back since the days of the Boxer Rebellion. The Russians had been doing the same since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And right now, we see the same emotions royal Palestinians and Israelis in the West Bank, Muslims in Europe versus the Christian majority, and here at home between rural and urban voters, between those with and without college degrees, and between rich and poor. Indeed, we see this struggle play out wherever we look. In our super-connected world, it's especially easy for people to feel humiliated or to feel that their wealth or class or job is not as valued as those of others they see on TV or in the media. But being treated with dignity and respect can do a lot to allay those feelings of humiliation and give people back a sense of worth and purpose. And as Tom believes, being listened to can also do wonders for people's self-esteem and their willingness to hear what others are saying. So please join me in welcoming Tim Shriver, whose decades of commitment to public service and making sure all voices are heard, in particular as head of the Special Olympics, epitomizes the values of Planet Word. Tim has been a school teacher, an author and educator, and chairs the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Tonight, Tim's going to tell us how he came to develop the Dignity Index and how it might be the simple tool that we all need to guide the hard conversations we're having. Thank you.
So there's a rumor in Washington that Tom Friedman is a good writer. But now I think everyone knows the secret that Ann Friedman is a brilliant editor and writer. If I'm not mistaken, is this true, Tom? Every single column you write, Ann edits? Yes, it is true. Does everybody know that? That's unbelievable. But thank you, Ann, for the beautiful introduction, and in particular for highlighting this nexus of humiliation and dignity, which I'm going to try to talk a little bit about today. And thank you for welcoming me here. When we developed this, I think I reached out to Tom and I said, I'm working on a project, and the place I need to land, the place we need to go with it, the venue in which I want to share what we're working on is this museum, because every museum struggles, in my view at least, knowing a little bit about a few of them, with how to stay relevant and future-oriented while they're capturing something that's in the past. You know, the classic vision of a museum is something behind a case, right? You look at it, you watch it, it's old. By definition, it already happened. And museums are always sort of like, but wait a second, we're trying to be relevant to the future. Well, this museum, in my view, has, or this, I don't know, do we call it a museum? This center, this pulse, this museum, has a unique, not just opportunity, but responsibility to the future. And the reason I wanted to come here is to sort of start the conversation. This is not a finished, I'm not here to present the final product. I'm here to, I hope, open a conversation. I was going to tell a funny story. I guess I'll tell it, even though we had Martin Luther King up here before, which was much better. So this story is about this book I wrote a couple years ago. It's not about selling the book, though. I was doing a little book tour, and I was in a hotel in the South, and I get on the, going up to the mezzanine where the function rooms are, and there's a guy in the elevator, and he's got a cowboy hat on, cowboy boots, silver belt, big silver belt buckle, and I push mezzanine, and he goes, "Anyone ever tell you you look like a Kennedy?" And I was sort of focused on what I had to do. I said, yeah, I heard that before, and the door's open. He said, "Well, that must really piss you off." So the actual reason that's relevant goes back to the scene, the quote that was there from Dr. King before. It is intuitively human to make judgments, and almost our superpower to make them quickly. And it's almost impossible to remember how often we get people wrong. Like how often we judge and how often we get it wrong. I spent 30 years in the Special Olympics movement, and if there's one thing I can tell you about if you don't know people or if you don't have immediate proximity or contact with people with intellectual developmental disabilities is the world gets them so wrong. I mean, every label, every category, special education, you name it, all the way on down the line, it's all about limitation and brokenness and disvaluing, and it's all wrong. And I understand why we do it. It's not a judgment against people that make mistakes. It's just an invitation to recognize how often we do. And to have a little humility in approaching the Chinese or the Russians or the Palestinians or the Israelis or Republicans. A little humility in approaching. I mean this in a town like this, and it's a Friday night now. People want to get out to dinner and stuff like that. But I want to start by saying, look, I think we've got a single problem in the country. This is Arthur Brooks, the former head, many of you probably know Arthur, the former head of AEI, now at Harvard. A cultural addiction to contempt. This is not an issue we typically think about, right? So I'm going to make a pitch tonight that there is an issue in our country that has not yet been named and not yet been monitored as an issue in the country. The same way immigration is an issue, and the Middle East is an issue, and education and so on, I think we have a new issue, and it is a cultural addiction to contempt. It is not something you'll find in a Capitol Hill briefing. It's not something you necessarily, if you watch the coverage of the debate, we'll get into that in a minute, you heard almost no discussion about this issue, and yet I think it's the most important issue for swing voters in this election. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The data in the country is obviously very bad. You've seen all this before. I want to just call people's attention to just one piece of data. The country's not working. People don't have confidence in the future. We know all that already. This is the one I'm most interested in. Almost a third of us, depending on how you count, have ended a relationship within our families or among our close friends over politics and culture. And if you don't believe that, I'm here to tell you that happens in my family. And I'm telling you, it's kind of funny, but it's not funny. It's horrible. And it's not necessary. It is directly a function, I believe, of what I call, this is kids. If you want to get angry about the contempt problem, recognize that it is making our children sick, lonely, and despairing about the future. And then you'd say, God damn it, that's outrageous. How dare they tear us apart like that? How dare we read and click on these things that demonize one another? Because what happens is our kids lose confidence in each other, they lose confidence in themselves, they lose confidence in the future. When I was Ann mentioned I was a teacher, in 1987, over here, I reported to the New Haven Board of Education in New Haven, Connecticut, an outrageous statistic. 20% of our kids were at risk of behavioral and emotional problems. 1 in 5. I got up in a room about this size, Board of Education here, and I gave the report. We had all the data, 5 separate scholars that studied our kids. 1 in 5 of our kids were at risk of behavioral and emotional problems. Look at it today. I mean, if you felt that you had either some role in this or some capacity to reverse it, not by offering more mental health treatment, which is needed, not by offering more behavioral supports, which are needed, but by changing the culture, how could we not take it seriously? So here's a premise, and you know, I'm going to get Tom and all of us into this because I think we're all in this. The premise here is that this is not an accident. Matt Taibbi's book and Kara Swisher's more recently. The goal of much of our media, not the columnist on humiliation and dignity, is to put you in a state of devotional anger. That's not an accidental outcome of reporting on the news. That's the goal of reporting on the news. Okay? The goal, as Kara says in her book last year, is to seed isolation, outrage, and addictive behavior. Anybody that's in an addiction business knows it sells. Coffee, alcohol, you go down the list. It works. This is an addictive cycle. We are all culpable. Politics, partisan media, and the algorithm are the superchargers of the cycle. We're paying all of them with our clicks and our tune-ins. Tom will tell you, again, I don't want to overly emphasize this, but columnists, how much more likely are they to get read if they put Trump in the headline? I mean, you could be writing about, you know, the pollination of bees and just put Trump in the headline and people will read it. Right? Why? Because it's addictive. It's a cycle on all this stuff. We're trapped in this system, and it's killing us. And it literally does. I'm just reading John Powell's book out from Stanford right now about it. But we know political speech can lead to violence as well. It's not just mental health problems, it's violence. So the uptick in anti-Semitism, in racism, in all this stuff is a predictable outcome from toxic speech. So, you know, you see this. This is just, we just put this clip together the other day, so I kind of use it because it's kind of fun. Or it's not fun, it's sort of despairing. But, you know, this is... So, picture yourself 15 and you wake up. Your mother says or your father says you have to be down for breakfast at 7:15. You wake up, you pick up your phone at 6:45, and that's what you see. And you wonder why the kids get to school, and they're like, what am I doing here? Right? And it's not just our children. I wanted you to see the detail. This is last 2 months ago's data from Frank Luntz. 47% of younger Americans. And you know who they're breaking off their relationships with? Their parents' generation. It's not just black, white, rich, poor, male, female, gay, straight, heartland, coastland. The generational gap is equally painful. And in some measures is worse. So here's our premise. We're going to get practical here in just a second. Our premise is that there's an antidote to contempt. It is dignity. Donna Hicks worked with Desmond Tutu in South Africa in the post-apartheid truth and reconciliation process. Richard Rohr comes at this from a more spiritual perspective. But my pitch to you is that we're in the process of trying to find our way into a new paradigm of how we resolve problems and how we develop belonging. Historically, Catholics could have belonged to this, Jews to that, Protestants to that, white to this, black to that, rich to this, poor to that. Historically, we did that, and in part what we did by belonging to our group was make sure we were better than the other group. Actually, we're much better. Catholics are much better than Protestants, I can tell you. I was raised to believe this. Right? So it doesn't work anymore. It sort of seems ridiculous, particularly to our kids. Dad, are you kidding me? That makes no sense. So we're trying to find a way to have belonging, but in the context of a universally shared dignity. So to Anne's point, that's all fine and well. It's a nice speech. If you have a great speechwriter, you could give a talk on it. Both Vice President Harris and President Trump have both said this in their convention speeches. But Emmanuel Cleaver said this to us a few years ago, a brilliant and quite animated congressman from Missouri, said, that's all fine and well. Everybody says that, but nobody gives a damn. You don't win talking about all this nice stuff. Nobody gets rewarded for it. So that's when we said, okay, game on. So we built this, and the concept here is that that democracy, in circles like ours, democracy is at stake. Democracy depends on debate, right? There's no democracy if you can't have debate. And we're at a point now where we can't even talk to each other, much less debate intelligently. And when you lose the capacity to have intelligent debate, as Yuval Levin has argued, the trust in institutions necessary to sustain them falls apart, and the institutions themselves cannot hold. So our premise here is that we've got to figure out how to do this. So here's the teacher in me. All right, everybody's got a little card, right? You will be graded. But I'm sorry to tell you, you're going to have a very tough grader. It's going to be you. This is how this works. This is a scale, normed, validated, and now worked on for almost 2 years by social scientists that has the capacity to measure only one thing. Only one thing. How we treat each other when we disagree. That's it. Not whether what you said is right or wrong. We don't measure that. Not whether you feel threatened. Not whether you're unsafe. Only whether your response is high in dignity or high in contempt. That's all we measure. Okay? So we spent a lot of time on this. Here's how it works. From 4 down is decreasing levels of dignity and increasing levels of contempt. It starts at we're better. It goes from we're better to we're good and they're not. It goes from that to they're evil. And it goes from that to they're not human. 5 and up goes the other way. It goes from basically equal time to I actually want to listen. To I don't just want to listen to find common ground. I want to listen even where we don't have common ground. To it doesn't matter. I'll treat you with dignity no matter what. So that's the way the scale works. And by the way, if something spontaneously possesses you, throw up your hand. I'm delighted to be interrupted at any point on this. But we're going to have a little fun with this right now, and then we'll talk a little bit about implications. So you get to do some scoring. Look at your score sheets. This is the quote here at the top is from Leon Mugesera before the outbreak of the Rwandan genocide. The quote below is from Heinrich Himmler. And you get to look at your scorecards and tell me what these quotes lead to. Do not be afraid. Anyone whose neck you do not cut is the one who will cut your neck. How would you score that between the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? That's a 1. Okay, they're not human. Now, what you're going to say is, okay, well, at least we don't have that in our discourse. No, we do. We find 1s almost every month in today's politics. And sometimes the politicians, I was just kidding, or I'm just using hyperbole. But some people don't hear hyperbole. Okay. All right, here we go. That's a 1. Okay, here's Hillary Clinton, a famous one. Okay, don't moan. This is not a partisan exercise. We're not trying to elect anyone here. We're just trying to understand the power of words. So would someone like to, well, we wouldn't have to read the whole thing. So there's a basket of deplorables. There's Trump supporters, and they're racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. They are irredeemable, but thankfully they're not American. Now this is a little harder. Look at your scorecard. I'm going to give you a hint. It's not on the 5 and up side. How would you score Mrs. Clinton in 2016? They are irredeemable, but thankfully they're not America. So that's a 3. That's a 3. They're not evil yet, but they're pretty darn close. We're good, they're bad. We're responsible for good things, they're responsible for bad things. And remember, just as some of you said too, people will hear too. You think, oh, and you know, we could do a longer digression on this because it's so interesting. And I mean, I'm a fan of Mrs. Clinton, isn't this not decided? But in her book, she says, yes, people criticize me for this quote, but it's true. And then she lays out the data. But it doesn't answer the question about what it does to people who you're calling irredeemable, right? It doesn't answer the question as to what that produces in terms of solving problems or healing divisions or protecting democracy. Oh, here's another one. Here's John McCain. I'd love to have, anybody want to read? Anybody want to speak as though they're Senator McCain? Big senatorial voice in the room, come on. Go ahead. Pick and choose.
We keep trying to find a way to win and without help from across the aisle. What have we to lose by trying to work together to find those solutions? We're not getting much done apart. I don't think any of us feel very proud of our incapacity. Merely preventing your political opponents from doing what they want isn't the most inspiring work. There's greater satisfaction in respecting our differences, but not letting them prevent agreements made in good faith that will help improve lives and protect the American people. The Senate is capable of that. We know that. We've seen it before. I've seen it happen many times. And the times when I was involved, even in a modest way, with working out a bipartisan response to a national problem or threat, are the proudest moments of my career and by far the most satisfying. John McCain, Senate floor speech.
Thank you very much. So this is the section I want you to score. By the way, you can see that you can learn this index in about 3 minutes, right? Like I have the 3-hour version of training you in it, but you see how, I hope it's almost intuitive. How would you score this? Good, that's a 6. So it's not just equal time, it's I'm looking for common ground. We can find our way through this. We can find things we can do together, right? So you start to see him moving up. Let's do, we'll do this last one here. This is Desmond Tutu in the, writing in the Book of Forgiving. Any other reader? Want to have her, will you read? Sure.
I have sat with condemned men on death row. I have spoken with former police officers who have admitted inflicting the cruelest torture. I have visited child soldiers who have committed acts of nauseating depravity, and I have recognized in each of them a depth of humanity that was a mirror of my own.
Now notice he doesn't say, I excuse acts of nauseating depravity. He doesn't say it's okay with me that police officers have admitted torture, have inflicted torture. He just says, I see myself in you. What do you score it? 8. That's an 8. And people will say, so, well, how could I possibly treat such a person with? But then, you know, I try to remind people, like, if you were saying someone deserves to be in prison, should they be treated with dignity in prison? Most people would say yes. They shouldn't be humiliated. They shouldn't be tortured. They shouldn't be free, but they don't have to have their dignity robbed from them. So here's the question, gang. This is also Desmond Tutu. I was had the chance to be in Davos many years ago. He was speaking, and questioner gets up in the back of the room and said, Archbishop, he says, beautiful lilting voice and great sense of humor and always both erudite and approachable and personable. Isn't it clear that evil is more powerful than good? And he said, no, evil is not more powerful than good. He said, but it is better organized. So the point here is we need, and this town is very important in this, and that's why this institution is so important. We need a deliberate, organized strategy if we're going to shift the culture. We don't need 100 million Americans, but we need an organized strategy if we want to shift the culture. We can't hope it will happen. Because the other side, I hate to put it this way because I'm not trying to demonize or treat people with contempt, but the other side is really well organized. The contempt machinery is really well lubed. So we need to get to work. So here's what we're working on so far. All this works in this is our inaugural group that scored. These are all college students at the University of Utah. They scored the 2022 midterms and released scores and got lots of really wonderful coverage from local media in and around Utah. They've decided to organize something they call Students for Dignity. And they're spreading that around the country. They distilled these skills on the back. These are part of, you'll see maybe a hint of, if those of you that know anything about social and emotional learning, these are skills that are all taught in our K-12 programs now. When you see good social emotional learning, how to regulate before you debate, how to listen to hear, not to respond. These are all skills that the kids worked on, and we're actually now teaching in some respects, how to be curious and not furious, all these kinds of, that actually help you move up. So when your son-in-law says that thing that just drives you crazy, or your wife once again says that irritating thing or brings up that thing that triggers you, try to regulate. Try to take 3 deep breaths. You'd be surprised. 3 deep breaths is harder than you think. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this just to let you know. They've taken this also to school boards and like the Salt Lake City school districts, and we're hoping to work now on almost 200 school districts in Oklahoma, Joby, because your mother's there. But because the very Republican red state governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, has said he wants, Kevin Stitt, the governor, has told his communications team that he wants every statement that comes out of his office to be 5 and above. And they actually send us drafts. They'll say, and he's in a big fight, but he's very conservative. I mean, very conservative. But he gets in these, it's a rough and tumble game, politics, but he's trying to do the same thing, and he'll send us statements. He'll say, how would you score this? And we'll send it back to him. That's a 3. You got a 3 in there. And he tells the comms guy, rewrite the damn thing. I got to have a 5. I'm not going to say he's perfect, but he's trying to do. So we're introducing this in schools and in school boards. Okay, this is one of my fun. This is what happens when kids learn this stuff really well. This is just for fun because I love it.
Are you smart?
Yeah.
Are you strong?
Yeah.
Are you brave?
Yeah.
Are you pretty?
Yeah.
Are you kind?
Not really.
Okay, that's self-awareness. That's But honestly, ask yourself, how many people do that well? And especially in disagreement. Like when you're in the thick of it, like you and I are really disagreeing on this border policy, how many times can I say, I can be really stubborn. I'll try, but you don't say that, right? Anyway, this kid's a genius, but that's a different thing. So this is Students for Dignity. I just want you to know that's happening. There's a short, I'm going to skip the video. Bank of America invited us to come in. We've trained 6,000 Bank of America employees. Why? Because they worry at the bank about the generation gap issues. They worry about bad teamwork, where we sit around the table and we talk, and then you and I go outside and say what a jerk she is. and there's a lot of contempt that is bubbling up in the workplace. They want to tamp it down and invite people to use dignity to act because they think it's problem solving 101. So it's just to say there's a little bit of people are catching on that I think this exists. Do you want to see the Ted Lasso clip or should we talk? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this clip, for those of you that watch Ted Lasso, this clip starts at a press conference where the recently fired coach or the recently departed coach that used to work for Ted has left and gone to the opposing team. And he sees a video of Ted Lasso bringing his team into the London sewers for a training exercise.
Coach Shelley, would you like to comment on the new picture of AFC Richmond that's just showed up online? What picture?
I think I know where the team's gone.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me. Probably have to train in a sewer because their coach is so shitty.
Okay, how would you score that? They probably have to, I had to X this out because I was talking to educators. They probably have to train in the sewer because the coach is so shitty. That's about a 4. I'd give it a 4. You could argue it's a 3, but really he hasn't gone on to the good and evil. He hasn't gone that far down. But we're better. I'm better than he is. Okay, so this is the really great thing. So then this is a little bit longer than I should.
Do you have any response to the comments made earlier today by your former assistant coach, Nathan Shelley?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I thought it was hilarious. I mean, he came and got us, didn't he? No doubt about that. Hey, but that's Nate the Great for you. You know, he's the same way on the pitch. You know, he'll find the tiniest little weakness in a team and just want to attack that. Yeah. I mean, he's a junkyard dog, man. And smart. They're real lucky to have him over there at West Ham. I wish him the best of luck. I guess I'm a little surprised that's all you could come up with, especially against me. You know, not one joke about me being a dumb American. Come on, man. Sitting there. I mean, I'm so dumb. Y'all supposed to say, how dumb are you? Gary?
Why?
Well, I mean, it's just classic joke structure. Give it a shot. I mean, I'm so dumb. Lloyd?
How dumb are you?
Okay. Well, I'm so dumb that the first time I heard y'all talking about Yorkshire pudding, I thought it was a fancy word y'all had for dog poop. Yeah. I mean, I'm so dumb.
How dumb are you?
Yeah, all right, well, you know. Well, whenever I text someone over here about money, I still spell pounds LBS. Yeah. Look, man, I'm not a great coach. Probably ain't. You know, I've been doing this sport now for 3 years, and I still get a chuckle every time someone talks about a handball violation. And not one crack about my appearance? About this mustache? I look like Ned Flanders is doing cosplay as Ned Flanders. I mean, when I talk, it sounds like Dr. Phil hasn't gone through puberty yet.
Okay, anyway, that's enough. I can let it go. Okay, so do you want to score this? Hold on. So that's Nate the Great. So look at the deflection strategy here. But think about this in the context of your own, like any conflict you're in. I'm not going to ask you to share, so you can just be honest with yourself. Think about any conflict you're in where someone has just hit you at the barb. The unavoidable impulse is the desire for revenge. Right? You cannot, I'd venture to say you almost cannot eliminate that. But you can channel it into something else, right? You can transform it. So he picks an advantage, he picks on something that's an advantage in the guy and turns it into a compliment. Now, if you were in a conflict, imagine the different outcome. Imagine someone saying we should build the wall and you're not going to do it because you're so shitty. And you responded, you know what? I really respect and value you even though we don't agree. And you know what? The other side is lucky to have you working for them. Just imagine the chances the probabilities that something good will come. I'm not saying it's automatic, but the alternative is automatic. Nothing good will come, right? So anyway, that's a 7. This is government stuff. I don't want to talk about that. But let me show you how this works in politics. Okay, so this is a friend of ours, John Arthur, running for the school board in the state of Utah. And he sent out this post, and he attacks his opponent, right? And my friend and one of my colleagues out there reads his thing and writes to him, you know, I'm a huge fan, and I was just disappointed to see you use this kind of language. You used 4 language on the dignity index. She wrote to John Arthur. And then she, because she's really bright, offers him a rewrite. And she flips the thing into an attack on from an attack on an opponent to a statement of his own, affirms his own strength. And he writes back saying, you know what, I didn't write the original thing, I'm going to apologize. This is embarrassing that I sent this out. And then he publishes this little video.
Hey everyone, this is John Arthur, your candidate for the Utah State Board of Education. Videos of my testimony in the U.S. Senate have popped up on YouTube. And while I'm grateful my love for teaching is being amplified, my positive message gets lost in titles like Teacher Schools Republican or Teacher Shuts Down Senator. I'm a public school teacher, shut down nothing. I'm starting conversations and finding solutions. Schools Republican, please. I'm on a mission to make public schools strong. Speaking of Republicans, they had their primaries this week and chose Molly Hart as their candidate in this race. Let me tell you about my opponent. Dr. Molly Hart is a smart, capable administrator and public servant. Not only that, she's a kind and decent person too. Our visions for the future of public education are very different, but I've got nothing but love and the utmost respect for her, and this November, the voters in District 7 will have 2 experienced educators to choose from on their ballot. That's how it's supposed to be. I'm not running against anybody. I'm running for Utah students, teachers, families, and public schools. I'm a public school teacher, and running in a political race has me wanting to say all the things I say to my 6th graders when they try to distract me. Thank you, but I got no time for nonsense. The future needs us to focus. We're too busy being great to get distracted. We can do this, so let's go.
Why do we love teachers? Come on. It's so obvious they know how to do this. They're trained to do this. If this is the room in front of a group of teachers and this side is Republican and this side is Democrat, this side is black or white or this side is male, or the teacher knows intuitively their job is to bring out the best in everyone. That's the job. The job isn't to make these people hate these people. You don't get a country out of that. You don't get a Supreme Court. You don't get Congress or legislature. You don't get an executive branch out of hatred. You get nothing. I mean, anyway, so I get excited about this. Anyway, this is governors. I just want you to know that, you know, Spencer Cox was the head of the NGA. Wes Moore, of course, our governor right here in Maryland. They led this conversation at the National Cathedral just a few months ago. You can see Ruth Okediji there, professor at Harvard, and Donna Brazil and yours truly, we all got. So here's just one quick example. This is a Frank Luntz taping of Governor Phil Scott of Vermont.
You can bring your points up,
this is
but you really
tracking
should be
Republicans
listening
and
to
Democrats.
what are their points? What are their fears? Why do they feel the way they do? And I think there's a way to get through that. Maybe learn something yourself. Maybe they will learn from you if you're calm and give a good argument instead of an emotional argument. If you still get to a point where you can't agree, that's okay. It's okay not to agree on every issue. It's okay not to win every issue. And hopefully you have that respect, mutual respect, so you can have those conversations. It's never too late to be a better person. It's never too late to be kind. It's never too late to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand what they're going through. And just be better people and lead by example. Together, we can disagree better.
So this is a Republican governor of a very, very blue state, Vermont. I think about 4 or 5 months ago, he's the most popular governor in the country. So what I hear a lot, and maybe you've heard it from politicians, is you can't win with this. That's not true. That's not true. You might have to be a little bit more clever, but you can win. And the reason is, in my view, it's a little secret we find from this dignity index stuff, is that people get less and less interested almost immediately in using it to judge other people. And they get much more interested quite quickly in using it to change themselves. We call it the mirror effect, a little catchy term. And what we think is going on is that contempt is hard to spot when you use it. And it's hard to use once you've spotted it. A woman came up to me a couple months ago and said, you know, I don't know what to tell you, I hate hateful people. And that's the most natural thing to say until you hear it. Everyone, I'm going to take the prerogative of the mic to say that everyone here has used contempt without noticing it. And once you notice it, you go, wait a second, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to use language that's going to be close to Heinrich Himmler. Like, I just don't want, don't take me there. Now, there will be people who will say, I don't care. But the vast majority of us want to do what we've talked about with this language is solve problems. You can't solve problems if you don't work across the aisle. No big ones anyway. Ease divisions. You can't have Thanksgiving in a large American family today if you haven't figured out how to ease the divisions. And prevent violence. Nothing we're doing right now in our politics is doing anything other than incent higher risk of violence. So if you want to prevent violence, if you want to ease divisions, if you want to actually make the democracy work and solve problems, not to mention problems in your own family, you almost have to conclude that you've got to try something else. Like the Einstein thing is true. We can't solve this problem using the old solution. I can't condemn Republicans out of this problem. I hate to say it, but look at the progressive politics and media of the last 5 years. How much effort they've spent, how much effort we've spent, I'm going to own it, trying to reveal to people how stupid Donald Trump is. How many people's mind have we changed? None. 0. And we just keep doing it as though that's going to change anybody's mind. Because we just can't believe how stupid those people are. And if we just tell them how stupid they are, they'll realize it, and then they'll come over to us. Like nobody with a 3-year-old would think that's a good strategy. Imagine if on the debate stage, okay, so here's the fun thing. Kate, do we have we have scores from the debate you can get to look at, and then we can start a conversation. We have handouts. So we scored 6 passages from the debate. Here's the passage you won't see. I know that 70 million Americans didn't vote for me the last time and won't vote for me this time. It doesn't mean I don't care about every one of them. It doesn't mean I don't want to represent every one of them if I get elected. And every one of those 70 or 80 million Americans who don't vote for me are still part of this country and a part of this country I value. No one said that. Not that hard. So you get to see here, you get to see a bunch of quotes. We just did this release and I tried to summarize it in a shorter version today. Wish me luck. I think I'm going on Fox next week to defend this. So the first one, you can score it yourself too. Kamala Harris, I've traveled the world as Vice President of the United States and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I've talked to many military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. How do you score it? It's right there if you want to cheat. It's a 3. Donald Trump, number 2. We're a failing. Tom, you get to read this one.
We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world they laugh. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world.
Now, what are the chances that's going to move a swing voter? 0. 0. This is the point I make when people say, well, you're not being practical. Don't you know that negative ads work? 0 is the chance that you're going to win over a swing voter with that. I don't care whether you think it's true. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Nobody moves when they're humiliated. Go back to the example that Tom and Ann used at the beginning. It just doesn't work. Okay, let's go to, you want to do a better one? Let's see, hold on, wait a second. Let's go to, you want to go to the back? Go to number 6. Yeah, if you can read. Does anyone want to read number 6 for us? I'm a teacher, I have patience. Okay, go ahead, yes, thank you.
Donald Trump on current administration's immigration policy. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
That's a 2. Now remember, some people, when they hear 2, think 1. Okay? It's not an accident. Some people, like just as if you were scoring it, you might have scored it a 1. I mean, you have the answer here, so you probably wouldn't. But you might score it a 1, and you think to yourself, well, wait a second. Left or right? They're trying to destroy our country? Hey, we got to do something. We can't let this happen. They're in charge? It's no wonder you get these conspiracy-minded things. You want to do, who wants to do 7? Go ahead, yes, please.
Kamala Harris on Trump's relationship with Putin. Why don't you tell the 80,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch?
Now, I mean, just be honest, you liked it when she said that. Right? Right, Ann? You thought, yeah. Okay, it's clever, fine, it's clever, maybe even it's funny. And again, I'm not taking sides. It's not to demean Vice President Harris. That's not the point of any of this. The point here is to ask us to have a movement that thinks about our words and thinks about the cultural tone that we're using in the way in which we express our disagreements, because, in my view at least, the future of the country is really, not rhetorically, not with high inflammatory rhetoric, it's really at stake, yes.
So what about the people who won't get out of their bubbles? So they won't even want to talk to
Right.
these people, in another bubble.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you work that?
Well, I think the reason people end up trapped in bubbles is because they're so addicted to the idea that the people outside their bubble are so horrible. I mean, that's war, right? That's what happens when you go to war. You've given up, and the answer to my problem is to kill you. Or at a cultural level, just to either cancel or whatever language you want to use. It happens on both. By the way, I'm sorry to say, none of this is good. I mean, neither party wins. We've been looking at this for 2 years. Neither party wins. There are times when one candidate uses more dignity than the other. And we don't judge people, by the way, just to be clear. We're not judging Donald Trump. We're just judging the speech, right? So I can say this speech is a 2 or a 3. I don't have to say Donald Trump is a 2 or Kamala Harris is a 3, just the speech. So, the answer is I think people get trapped after a long period of pain that produces fear, that produces anger. I mean, one of my mentors says that all spirituality is about what you do with your pain. And I think, in many ways, all politics is too, at its heart. Here we are as a people. I want to be your mayor or your congressman or whatever I want to be, because I know that something's not quite yet there for you in your life, right? There's some point at which you want more. You've got pain, I've got pain. I don't say it that way, but I tell you, I'm going to help make it better. And this kind of politics is what we do to make your pain worse, by projecting it onto someone else. So I'm scared about the future, I'm scared about AI, I'm scared about the changing social mores, whatever it is. I'm scared about immigration, I'm scared about my family, I'm scared about my income. Guess what? It's your fault. Which is the projection of...
Who I am.
Yeah.
My words are about my identity.
Yeah.
Don't mess with that.
Don't mess with that. It's too close to the bone. I can't tolerate it. I've given up on that. I'm putting a boundary. Boundaries are okay. We all have to create boundaries in life. We all know that. But the adding of contempt and projection of my pain onto everybody else, that's where you get into families fall apart, communities fall apart, faith-based communities fall apart, and sadly, so too can countries. Yes?
With these debate quotes, you certainly did pick out some very negative things here. But don't you think there were moments where Kamala Harris offered a vision and a more positive message?
We tried to find...
And did you look for the same in Donald Trump?
We did.
Especially their closing statement.
Yeah. So you've nailed a very important point. We have an AI tool. We have a large language model that Berkeley built for us, but apparently, I don't understand this, somebody is smarter than me can. It's so big and so expensive, it can't be used. So, so they used it, they wrote an academic paper on it, they published on it, they perfected it, it's 99% accurate, but we can't use it. So we're working on that. So we can't scan the entire transcript in real time and pick the quotes, which the large language model can do. It can find the quote and it can score it. We can't do that, so we have to select. So you're right, one of the places selection bias exists is in the selection of the quotes. There were many points at which Vice President Harris was hopeful and optimistic, but not in addressing a disagreement with him. So the only thing we're interested in here, this is important, this is an important distinction, is how we treat each other when we disagree. It's not are you happy or hopeful. I would say, subjectively, I think she's more happy and hopeful than he is. And I do think that's a big, politically, a powerful thing. But I think we have to I believe we should recognize that a factor in the decline of our national discourse and in our national polity and in our capacity to act as a nation, both at home and abroad, effectively, is our incapacity to disagree effectively enough so that we can act. In other words, again, Tom's the expert on this, but when I was a kid, the idea that the disagreements ended at the ocean's edge meant not just a nice rhetorical gift, but when you spoke to the rest of the world, you spoke with force. This is what we will deliver. And it's not that we have any less weaponry. It's not that our economy's any smaller. It's not that we're, population smaller than we were 40 or 50 years ago. It's that people don't think we can execute. So of course they think, imagine if you were, the person coming to fix your house. Well, he's a nice guy and all that stuff, but he doesn't know how to fix the plumbing. Well, you can't execute when you're at loggerheads. So this is like I say, it's an issue hiding a little bit beneath the surface. People say, well, we could be more effective in Ukraine, or we could be more effective with NATO, we could be more effective in the South China Sea if only what? We had more bombers, or if we had. No, it's if we were more coherent as a country, then people would be able to say, I can trust them. I know they're going to deliver. And what, again, Yuval Levin has done on institutions is true of the country as a whole, in our view. So that's why we only isolate. We don't pull the hopeful things that Vice President Harris said. We just pull the places where she characterizes him. So, you know, in some ways, this is a long version of a plea for a planet dignity word project. I'm pitching Anne now. I'm pitching a planet word project. I don't know how it would look. I don't know what it would do. I'm not sure exactly how the museum could act. But I do think some way in which this center, this place, could act as a hub for people trying to learn how to both uncover and recognize this underlying presence of contempt and hatred in our speech and its cost, both to us personally and to us politically, and how to do better would be a worthwhile part of the mission of the museum. Yes, other comments? You know I pitch all the time, right? Yes, sorry.
You talked about the building skills as something that's being used in school.
Yes.
So at my child's school, I think it's called Peace Path. They see a lot in curriculum now.
Yep.
And my observation is that parents want this for their kids, but that there's some dissonance when it comes to them thinking about using it themselves. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that and how we might think about bridging that gap.
So I left my full-time job in Special Olympics about 5 years ago because I wanted to take what I thought I'd learned from those athletes, which basically is summarized as treat me with dignity and you can't believe how beautiful I can be. So that was like in my head. And I started going to schools because I thought, you know, I'm a teacher, that's what I know how to do. We'll do something in schools, right? We'll broaden the message of this movement in schools. And I went to a school in Iowa, Des Moines. We had a focus group with 8th graders. And I was talking to the kids about bullying. Why are we so divided? Why is there so much animosity? And this young 8th grade girl says, well, you know, we don't have that much bullying in our school, and it's okay. And I said, yeah, but, you know, when there are bullies, how do you handle it? And she's like, no, the teachers are pretty good here. We actually do really well. We have these different programs. And I asked again, like the third time, like irritating teacher, right? And she said, you know, she sort of looks up at me and goes, you know, I know you keep asking, we don't have bullying here. She said, you want to know where the bullies are? Look at the adults. She said, when I get home at night and I watch my mom watching TV, there's bullies on TV all the time. So don't ask us about bullies, go to them. And I was like, you're right. You're right. Which is what sort of set me looking for something like this, that I could actually talk to a governor or a journalist or Fox News or MSNBC or or Facebook or, you know, we're not there yet, but, you know, actually invite adults to take responsibility for the mess we're creating. So I think you're right. Kids get it. And I think this generation, I mean, I visited 4 schools in Oklahoma last week. Oh my God, I could spend the whole day talking about these kids. It was really staggering how emotionally tuned they are to each other, to difference, and how powerful that is as a motivator for academic achievement, about finding careers. Talk to these high school kids about, I won't bore you with it. But the kids, I do believe, get this. Now, I know there's a lot of people that talk about how these kids are so intolerant and they're coming up and they don't understand nuance, they don't understand how to talk and debate. That's true. But I think that's more that they're modeling their political behavior on what they see as the political norm. And I think most of those same kids who were, my generation is, they don't get it. They don't even know how to protest right. I mean, we could show them how to protest. We know how to do that. I think there is a disconnect on politics and sometimes on race and culture issues and gender issues and some of those more divisive issues. But I do think, generally speaking, this generation's growing up with a much bigger vision of what it means to treat people with dignity than our generation did, I think. I don't have a good data on that, though. Other thoughts? Yeah.
So, you started by talking about media, social media, whatever, selling fear and sort of contempt because it works, right?
Yeah.
Who sells dignity in that same way? Like, where can you get that?
Well, one of the reasons I put the Ted Lasso thing up is for that reason, because I think it's important to remember that everybody says, well, that's the only thing that sells. But Ted Lasso had the biggest rating on television, last year. And people still, if I would have said skip that, I would be like, I'm walking out of here. That's the only thing of all the things you've talked about, that's the only thing I really want to see. So I do think, again, Tom can speak to this much more effectively than I can, but I do think there are people, Tom's a good example, who are trying to tell hard stories, real stories, stories about contempt and hatred without, glossing over it. We're not, I always say, well, you telling me to abandon my principles? No. This is not like centrist, be nice, civility. This is fight for your principles and add one. Treat other people with dignity. That's it. You want to be pro-life or pro-choice? You want to be pro-wall or pro-open borders? You want to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine? Go for it. Don't temper it at all. In fact, be stronger about it. But do not humiliate your opponent, because it won't work. So who's doing it in the news? That's a tough one. That's the toughest one. Tom, you can jump in here and comment on how this, yeah.
It's reminding me of so many things. It's just beautiful. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of things happened this week. One was that, this is off the record.
Because it's going to be good.
I got invited, yeah, I realize that. I'll tell you the but I'll tell you the second. Well, one is just general that I have no problem getting a visa to China. It's really difficult, I can tell you, for journalists now, Western journalists and columnists, to get a visa to China. And it's not because I'm soft on them.
Right.
But here's how I did a big takeout from China last year. And it made a devastating, I thought, critique of Xi Jinping. The conclusion was, you broke trust with the world, right? When trust was the most important currency. But I began the column, Tim? I began it by saying, the parks you have built in Beijing are just amazing. I am so struck. I came here when the city couldn't breathe, and what you have done to clean up this city is just amazing. And you know what? Every time I come here and I look at the buildings here, I'm always reminded, this didn't come from oil. They came from the hard work of the Chinese people.
See, it's beautiful.
Now let me talk to you about where I think you're going wrong.
Yeah.
So I got home from that trip. By the way, it was a trip I was on where I'd gotten a visa because I was giving a talk for the China Development Forum, and it was expressly not a journalist visa. Okay? I was instructed, you are not allowed to write on the trip. So I did it off a Taiwan dateline, so I happened to go to Taiwan after. And I got home and I got a call from the Chinese embassy. Senior diplomat wanted to see me. And I thought, it's the end of my visits to China. And I met this senior diplomat, and she said to me, tell me more about your trip. And so, as you know, I'm working on a book now, the title of which is What You Say When You Listen, which is the first lesson you learn when you're a Jewish kid from Minnesota who wants to cover the Arab Muslim world in the 70s. Not a natural thing. So I just give one more example. I went to Israel. I waited actually 3 weeks after October 7th to go. Because I've seen these people do so much terrible stuff to each other. And I've learned that the most dangerous words in the Middle East are, the world will never be the same. Actually, it repeats itself a lot, And so I waited actually 3 weeks to go. And I only did one big takeout when I was there. I did a story about how Bedouins from a small town in Beersheba saved Israeli Jews in Kibbutz Be'eri. It was an amazing story. A member of this Bedouin family was a kitchen worker in the kibbutz. And he ran away when Hamas came, and he ran into a woman from the kibbutz who was out riding her bicycle. And they ran into each other, and they hid together in a bush. And he used her phone to call his family in Beersheba, and they got in their Jeep, and they drove to save their cousin. One of them was their brother. They found them using Google Maps in the bush. They rescued them. Then they were barreling down the highway to get out of them. A pop-up Israeli army checkpoint appeared. They thought they were kidnapping her. She then had to save them. Then they went to the hospital in Beersheba where Israeli Arab doctors treated both of them. It's complicated, folks.
Yeah.
You know, and that is why my message to all these college students, and I'll end this rant here, is I love Israelis and Palestinians. But God save me from their American friends sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you have exactly one job. You only have one job. You have exactly one job. Strengthen the moderates in your community.
Right.
And if you're not doing that job, you're wasting everybody's time.
Right, and costing lives.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful, and I mean, this is why, you know, obviously Tom has this extraordinary career and great contributions to the country as a journalist and as a writer. And, you know, we can sit there and go, well, John, why don't we have more Toms, and why don't we have more Phil Scotts, and why don't we have more all these different people? And the answer is, I think we do, actually. I think there are more people like those people you described. I was telling Ann, I interviewed out at Aspen the 3 members of the Parents Circle, each of whom have lost someone in the conflict, 2 Israelis and 1 Palestinian, who have lost family members. And they've built the Parents Circle. Their advice, they said, we go to these college campuses and we give one piece of advice. Stop taking sides, take the side of peace. Now, you can say that's a side, but they're so angry at Americans for deepening the divisions in their own country when they're trying to get out of them. Yes, sir.
Yeah, picking up on what Tom said, I'm thinking about 9/11, how that brought us together.
Yeah.
In Florida, you have a hurricane that brings us together. But then those people will go back to their bubble. They'll go back to their homes, and they'll get fed the same kind of feelings. So how do we create these feelings of crisis that we're in this together? We got to save each other. Let's run toward the accident, help the person out of the burning car. And at those moments, you don't know who's what party. So, and then we go back to our bubbles. So that's what we got to crack.
I mean, I go back to that your little eighth grader in Iowa. You know, I think we've got to do better. We have to do better as adults. I mean, I would just say, if you click on the hate, you're paying for it. So stop. I mean, is 40 people in this room? That's 40 people who aren't paying the outrage tonight. If you don't turn it on when you get home. I mean, maybe you're addicted like a lot of people. I'm not accusing you of anything. But here's the point. This is kind of everybody thinks this is intractable. It's not intractable. This is culture. Culture is a human creation, right? It's not. It's all we need. Gladwell's book says 10%. So depending on how you count the math, it's 20 million Americans. That's a lot, but that's not that many. But we got to organize and actually have campaigns that have people tuning out the partisan and the hatred and the contempt and the outrage. And we have to have leaders who we reward for bringing us together.
Well, I would just say, I left this city's politics to go to Baltimore's politics. And Baltimore's slogan is "Be kind." Mm-hmm. And it's interesting as you're talking about the index. I love the fact that it's about individual statements and individualizing, but as someone who's leading in political circles, what are some policies or because you're right, people who want to come into asset-based conversations or come from 7, 8, 9 aren't welcome or don't last. Mm-hmm. So what are things that we can do to kind of complement the index as individual statements, but also as policy, as leaders in government, agencies, because there has to be something that we have to do along with the rhetoric. Because I'm surprised that no one comes to the table asset-based. They come to fight. Right. Every agency comes to fight for the money, fight for the mayor's attention, fight for the audience, and there's and so the word I've been shocked that we don't find the word collaboration, authentic collaboration, in anything right now.
Right. Well, I think none of what I'm saying is going to solve policy problems, right? I'm an educator. I want more money for public schools. Just by telling people to use more dignity and contempt is not going to fund the budget. I get it. So in some ways you say, well, come on, we got to get to work. But my point would be that as long as people come to the meetings, and I spent 15 years in New Haven Public Schools going to meetings where everybody fought all the time, and they fought like gloves off, right? And it didn't produce anything. It just doesn't. It doesn't work. I mean, this is the point. Like, the way to challenge people is to say, does it work? That's why I point out that, 6 years of people attacking Donald Trump hasn't moved a single voter. So if you want to move those voters, guess what? It's not working. It's not working. Guys, time out. It's not working. So calling him a disgrace doesn't move the dial. I don't know what the polls will say. Obviously, we can all hope for some outcomes here, but it doesn't work. So I think, we need leaders who can transform that meeting and who can find ways to build the kind of collaboration. We need to amplify their voices. And, I wish I had like a silver bullet. I want to do a measure, by the way, which I'd love to be able to tell you, maybe 5 years from now I can, that Baltimore has a higher dignity index score than Washington, or than, well, I don't know, maybe you do, but I don't have the data to support that. But I'd love to be able to start to, Bhutan tracks happiness. It's a little bit soft for me, but it's fun. Berkeley and other places are trying to track, versions of happiness in the United States. I'd like to track this in both on the internet, like the tone of language, as well as in public discourse, and see if we can start to look at, is Kansas doing better than Missouri? If so, is it maybe related to the fact that they have leaders who do more cooperative work? Most of these states, by the way, the problem isn't Republicans and Democrats, because I don't know what the number is, something like 2/3 or maybe even more of the states are single party or supermajority states. The problem, Kevin Stitt told me, in Oklahoma is Republicans. The problem that the Biden administration had a lot on many policy issues, and I'm sure people here know more than I do, is the progressive wing, trying to move progressives. I mean, I've talked to two different cabinet members over the last year about they just can't get anything done not because of the Republicans. So, we definitely need new strategies on this stuff. Yes?
Do you think that, so you were saying about the generational gap, about the children, the younger generation is actually learning this dignity index from when they're young, but with the generation that's in power now, is there a way to I don't know, how do you get them to understand this dignity index and put it in place, and then, or are we gonna have to wait till they age out of the system and then we get the younger people coming in to like...
Well, the answer to how we change culture is obviously super complex. There's no social scientist who can tell you there's a good answer. I do know it changes fast now. If you look at, Barack Obama ran in 2008 opposed to gay marriage. It's almost laughable now, right? I mean, how could that possibly have, like, you look around there, what? Yeah, he did. And within 5 years, it was a complete shift. Now, it didn't happen just in 5 years, but it moved quickly once it moved. I think if we start to make contempt backfire, embarrass people, and we did this with the R word. I'll give you one last quick, we're probably out of time, yeah? But, so, when I was at Special Olympics, people used to use the word retard a lot. Most of us, people my age, grew up calling people retards on the playground. Don't be such a retard. You dropped the ball, you're a retard, all that stuff. Super painful word, right? Nobody thought twice about it, using it. I mean, literally. So we had a bunch of kids, and they said, we're going to organize a campaign to spread the word to end the R word. It was a bunch of high school kids decided they were going to do this. We polled it about 3 months in after we started. When we start a campaign, that means we go to high schools and kids organize old-fashioned drives to sign a pledge with a yellow pad on a clipboard. We polled it at the beginning. It was about 78% opposed to telling me what I can say. I don't mean it. It's not a slur. It just means to slow things down. It's used in music. All this stuff people would say. Don't tell me how to constrain my free speech. Within 3 years, 78% were in favor of us. Almost immediate flip. Now, you still hear it, but you don't hear it as much. And if I got up here and started calling people that name, people would be like, ooh, that's a little, like, I can't believe he said that, right? You'd go back in your car and go, wow, right? Now, how did that happen? I'm guessing no one in this room had anything to do with it, but everybody followed it. Or not everybody, most people. So culture can switch, and it switches often. So I don't think any of this is inevitable. I think the forces are strong. AI is going to make it harder. The reach of contempt is serious, but if not us, like I think we've got to start, like if you get an email in the next week from a politician you like that uses a lot of contempt and has in the headline, he's dangerous, write back and say, I love you, I want to support you, but I don't support this because this scored a 2 on the Dignity Index. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Small numbers of, in this case, highly influential people organizing little pieces of energy in that direction makes the guy who's writing that email go, I can't believe that. That's interesting. I wonder why they said that. Check that out. What is she talking about? That's my hope. And I'll close with, did I put anything else? Oh, this is a great clip, but we don't have time
folks,
for it.
As you've probably
You
heard,
do?
Last night we lost one of the greats. Country music legend Toby Keith passed away at the age of 62. Now, I was shocked and saddened when I saw the news this morning. I knew Toby was ill, and he'd been fighting stomach cancer for some time, but I still had hope that we'd see each other again and that we would hear him on the stage. Because I was lucky enough to become friends with Toby over the years, as improbable as that seems. We met very early on the Colbert Report. And back then, there was a not-so-helpful legend that I had knives out for some of my guests, and it didn't help that at the beginning I sometimes did. And I remember having some kind of plan for Toby, I think related to his Boot in Your Ass song. But right before I went on stage, I remember vividly looking down at my shoes and saying, what are you doing? You're a host. He's your guest. Make him feel welcome. See who he is. And what do you know? We hit it off like a house of fire. I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed talking to Toby Keith. And evidently, Toby had a good time too, because after the show, I was headed to a post-mortem meeting, and he was coming out of his green room, and those rooms were on the same hallway. And as he was heading for the door that goes out onto 54th Street, he turned and caught my eye and said, hey man, you do a great job. Whatever the it is you do. And I took that as the greatest compliment, so much so that my then head writer, Allison Silverman, for Christmas had that stitched on a pillow for me. And it has been in my office ever since. That day, Toby taught me not to prejudge a guest and to have my intention, but to keep my eyes open to the reality of who they are. And for that lesson, and for a lot of other things, I'm always going to be grateful. This is a man who rose from Oklahoma's oil fields, where he worked on a rig, and the state's football fields, where he was a semi-professional defensive end, to become one of the most consistent hit makers in country music for more than 3 decades. 20 Billboard #1 songs, 42 top 10 hits, and rooms full of platinum and gold albums. Toby was a great performer, unapologetically patriotic, opinionated, brash, often controversial, but resonating with legions of fans by writing their lives in a very real and entertaining way. So we had him on a lot. He was always fun. He was in my Christmas special back in 2008. We had him on this show where he gave me that guitar that you see right there, which my son now plays, and I hope he'll think of Toby when he does it. One of my greatest honors was when I was asked to induct Toby into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, where I got to sing As Good As I Once Was, a song I used to listen to every night before going on stage. I think he enjoyed how unlikely a pair we seemed. I sure did. You know, like when people are excited when a duck and a horse are friends? Well, for the record, I was the duck. But Toby was always surprising people. You would think you know who Toby Keith was, and then you're watching Obama's Nobel acceptance speech, and there's Toby Keith giving him a standing ovation. Toby, what are you doing this time? Toby taught me not to judge people too quickly. And with his passing, I'm going to try to remember that again. It's something we all need to remember, because I'm sure Toby and I disagreed about many things, as so many Americans do these days. More and more of us are angrier and angrier with each other. But tonight, I will issue this invitation to anybody. I do not care who you are. I will meet you at this place. I will meet you at being brokenhearted that Toby Keith is gone. Thank you, big dog. We'll be right back with Joanne Reed.
So it's a little bit of a master class. It sounded a lot like your column, Tom. You know, pick out the things that someone's good at, notice that you can't prejudge, and you build powerful relationships. And you don't have to agree on everything. In fact, thank God we don't. But you can, Joby Taylor's here, who's worked on the Peace Corps return programs. What did the Peace Corps do? I grew up around it, All these people we thought of that, the idealistic young Americans going to help people in the developing world. That's not what they were doing. They went to live and meet and listen and learn. Learn the language, live eye to eye, get out of the downtown, be in the village, meet, learn, understand, listen. That was the great American innovation of the Peace Corps. I mean, USAID is great, so is the State Department, but that wasn't what the Peace Corps was about. Peace Corps was about this. We're different. I want to learn. I want to listen. I want to understand. It's what makes this country, when we're at our best, great. And we need a groundswell of people who, and maybe this little tool kit here, I don't know, I hope it can help. So anyway, thank you all for coming tonight.